Picture Spain in sepia tones. The year is 1947. The world is still licking its wounds from World War II, but on the Iberian Peninsula, time seems to have frozen. The country lives under the long, heavy shadow of the Francisco Franco regime. It is an isolated nation where fear is common currency and hunger is a daily guest in working-class homes. For our international audience to understand the setting, we are in the region of Murcia, in southeastern Spain, an arid land of relentless sun and nights of absolute silence. The town is Jumilla. Today, it's known for its wine, but back then, it was a place where electricity was a luxury and news traveled slowly on the backs of mules or in hushed conversations in the town squares. It was exactly here, far from the eyes of the modern world, far from American military bases or major urban centers, that one of the most complex, detailed, and disturbing close encounters in European UFO history took place. It wasn't a fleeting sighting. It was a home invasion, a dialogue, a medical exam, and a promise. The protagonist? A girl of just 8 years old named Próspera Muñoz. What she saw and what was done to her defied not only the technology of the time, but the very understanding of reality itself. I am the architect of enigmas, and today, on Alien Cases, we are going to walk the dusty roads of Villa Próspera to unearth a secret kept for decades. But before we cross the threshold of this ship, I need you to be part of this investigation. Leave your like right now. Every interaction is a flare signal to the algorithm, telling YouTube that we must keep exposing these mysteries. And tell me in the comments, do you believe childhood memories can be blocked and recovered decades later, or does the mind create fantasies to fill the voids? Your opinion is vital. Check your subscription. Consider becoming a channel member soon to have your name cited in our videos and unlock exclusive benefits in the Members Club. Now, brace yourself. We are going back to 1947. Catholic Church, which dictated morals and customs. In this survivalist landscape, the Muñoz family was considered fortunate. They were working class, yes, but they owned a coffee shop in the town center, a social refuge where locals traded the few bits of daily news. The father was a meticulous, gentle man, a pillar of stability. The mother, zealous, fought against the dust and scarcity to keep her 4 daughters impeccable, raising them with the strictness of the era. Among them shone little Próspera. At 8 years old, she was the antithesis of that gray world. Extroverted, vibrant, a born explorer. While her older sister, Anita, 4 years her senior, was the image of prudence and reserve, Próspera ran through the fields, curious about everything nature had to offer. The family owned a rural retreat about 7 miles from town in a locality called La Jimena, a simple country house christened Villa Próspera in honor of the youngest daughter. Do not imagine luxury. It was a rustic structure with exposed wooden beams, whitewashed walls, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards. There was no electricity. When the sun went down, the darkness was absolute, broken only by candlelight or oil lamps. The guardian of this sanctuary was Uncle John, the father's brother. John was a man of the land, weathered by the sun, who tended the crops and a small flock of sheep. He lived by the rhythm of nature, moving around in a cart pulled by a mule. He was a practical man, armed with an old shotgun to protect the flock from wolves or thieves. For him, the world was physical, tangible, and predictable. But in the summer of 1947, the predictability of rural life in Jumilla was about to be shattered. It all started with a distortion in the landscape. On an afternoon that should have been like any other, Próspera and Anita were riding in the cart with Uncle Juan. The rhythmic sound of the mule's hooves and the creaking of wooden wheels provided the usual soundtrack. Suddenly, the girl's gaze was drawn to the horizon. Lights! But they weren't stars, nor the glow of a distant city. They were bands of colored lights, vibrant, sketching out what looked like a rainbow. But there was something fundamentally wrong. There was no rain, no humidity, and those colors weren't coming from the direction of the sunset. The innocence of the children tried to catalog it as a strange twilight, a natural wonder. But Uncle Juan, with decades of experience reading the sky and the weather, felt a chill. He knew where the sun set, and he knew those lights defied the natural order of things. He fell silent, watching, with that animal instinct that something was lurking. Night fell, bringing a palpable unease. The rural silence, usually heavy and peaceful, was torn apart. Dogs, every dog in the vicinity, began to howl and bark with desperate intensity. The Muñoz family dog, an animal known for its docility and calm, transformed. He howled at nothing, trembled, scratched at the door. Uncle Juan, realizing the animal's terror, allowed him inside the house, something rare for the hygiene standards of the time. Inside, by candlelight, the tension grew. What were the animals sensing that the humans couldn't see? The answer came the next morning, and it was grotesque. During their morning walk, Juan and the girls encountered a neighbor, a shepherd. The man was in a state of shock, pale, stuttering. He reported that during that night of howling, his flock had been attacked, but not by wolves. Several sheep were dead. They had been mutilated. Specific organs, parts of the reproductive system, had been removed. The shepherd, a man accustomed to the carnage of natural predators, was terrified by one detail: the precision. There were no tears, no blood scattered like in a wolf attack. These were surgical cuts, clean, made with a technology or instrument that this humble man had never seen. He spoke of going to the police, but what would he say? That a phantom surgeon operated on his sheep in the dark? While the adults tried to rationalize the horror, Próspera had her first direct contact. Back on the family property, Próspera's curiosity drew her to a nearby hill. There, floating with unnatural stability, were two spheres, red and yellow, pulsating, moving erratically like insects made of light. Any adult would have run, but Próspera was a fearless child. She approached. She reached out. The contact was immediate and violent. A sensation of intense burning shot through her hand. Crying, she ran to Anita. Her older sister, always protective, tried to calm her, promising to treat the wound as soon as they got home. But here, the mystery deepens. Hours later, when they went to examine the hand, the burn had vanished, gone without a scar, without a trace. The skin was intact. Uncle Juan, now adding up the lights, the howls, the mutilated sheep, and the attack on his niece, went into defense mode. He locked the doors. He checked the shotgun shells. The atmosphere at Villa Próspera was one of siege. They were surrounded by something they didn't understand. The following afternoon, Juan's fortress was breached without a door being forced. Próspera and Anita were looking out the window when it appeared. A silver object, discoid, about 10 feet in diameter. It didn't fly. It hovered a few inches off the ground, gliding smoothly toward the house. It had a glass dome on top, and, most disturbing of all, it was absolutely silent. It defied gravity without emitting even a hum. Fear paralyzed Anita. She ran to close the shutters, trying to block the vision of the thing. But Próspera was hypnotized. She couldn't look away. The object parked right in front of the rustic house. A hatch opened. They came out. Two beings, small, the stature of a child, about 4 feet tall. Their skin was pale with a slightly bluish tint, almost sickly for human standards. Their eyes were large, elongated, black, dominating their faces. They wore white jumpsuits, tight, impeccable, contrasting with the farm dust. They wore boots and gloves. They walked to the door. The dog, the one that had howled in terror the night before, was now motionless, in a trance, watching the visitors as if they were old acquaintances. The beings entered. There was no violence. There was a strange calm, a dreamlike atmosphere that seemed to dampen the panic. Anita, in an absurd reflex of manners instilled by her mother, offered a glass of water. The being accepted, He held the glass, mimicked the gesture of drinking, but did not ingest the liquid. His eyes scanned the house, analyzing the simple furniture, the utensils, as if they were in an anthropology museum. Then they removed their gloves. They only had 4 fingers, thin, long, elegant, and strange. They pointed at Próspera. The communication didn't seem entirely verbal, but the words echoed in their minds. It is her, not the other. They spoke of a duplicate. They said there was a girl identical to Próspera in a place called Venus. Years later, Próspera was categorical. They used the word Venus, but made it clear they weren't referring to the neighboring planet, that hot, acidic desert. Venus was a name, a code perhaps, a reference to a base or a dimension. They made an offer to the 8-year-old girl. They asked if she wanted a gift. Do you want a gift? Próspera's innocence spoke louder. Yes, I want to heal. But they refused. No, not healing. We will give you precognition, the ability to know the future. They proved it right there. They began to narrate details of Próspera's life, things she had already lived and events that would only happen years, decades later. The girl listened, confused, amazed, and terrified. Before they left an enigmatic warning, laughing among themselves. We will return in 90 years, but you people don't live that long. The object outside glowed intensely and vanished. When Uncle Juan returned, he found the girls in shock. Fearful of being called crazy, they summarized the impossible event into a mundane lie. 2 strange men asked for water. But the night was far from over. The house plunged into darkness, but the poltergeist activity began. Cups broke on their own. The pantry door jammed as if welded shut. The dog went back to howling. Uncle Juan slept with the shotgun on his lap, but an unnatural sleep, heavy as lead, fell upon him and Anita. Only Próspera remained awake. In the early hours, a silhouette appeared at the window. It was one of them. He was calling her, not with a voice, but with will. Próspera got up. She passed her uncle and sister, who slept like the dead, and opened the door. Outside, the scene was pure science fiction. There were 3 beings now, the 2 from before and a third one who seemed older with wrinkled skin, emanating an aura of authority, the leader. They guided her to a nearby slope, and there, parked, was the mothership, a much larger object. Around it, activity was feverish and silent. Tall figures resembling robots or humanoid machines were working. Próspera saw with her child's eyes one of these machines rip an entire olive tree from the ground, roots and all, and carry it into the ship as if it were a twig. They were collecting samples from Earth. The family dog was there too, floating, asleep, being carried along. Do not fear, the being said. He is fine. Próspera was lifted by a beam of light. Gravity ceased. She floated into the belly of that metallic object. Inside the ship, there was none of the rustic darkness of Via Próspera. There was light, illuminated corridors, glowing screens on the walls displaying high-definition images of the outside, unthinkable technology for 1947, when television was barely in its infancy. She was taken to an exam room, and there she encountered something that would break the barriers between species. A female figure. She had pale skin like the others, the large black eyes, but her features were softer, more human. And when Próspera looked at her hands, she saw 5 fingers. The leader noticed the girl's gaze and explained. Her mother was from Earth. A hybrid, a bridge between 2 worlds, living there, on that ship, observing the human child. Próspera was placed on a bed or exam table. The collection began. No pain, no gushing blood, but invasive. They took blood, skin samples, hair. They used instruments to examine her digestive system and reproductive systems. On a screen beside her, Próspera saw the image of her own brain. and she saw when they inserted something. 2 small red objects, tiny, were implanted in her head. What is that? She thought. But she felt an artificial peace, a chemical or psychic comfort that prevented her from panicking. During the exam, a moment of bizarre levity occurred. Próspera noticed that the being's fingertips glowed red. Curious as any child, she commented out loud. The beings laughed, a strange sound but recognizable as laughter, and showed her their hands, like adults entertaining a toddler. Before returning her, the final warning: you have a copy, and you will not remember any of this until it is time. A flash. Próspera woke up the next day, near noon. Her dress was torn, her feet dirty with red earth. Uncle Juan was confused, suffering from a headache due to excessive sleep. Anita remembered nothing. Próspera's memory was locked away, sealed in some deep place in her mind. Life went on. Spain began to open up slowly. Próspera grew up, worked in the coffee shop, got married, had children. But the visitors never totally abandoned her. They became ghosts on the periphery of her vision. In 1954, at the coffee shop, 2 short men, wearing trench coats that were too big and huge hats hiding their faces, asked for coffee. They didn't drink. They looked at her and said, "You still don't remember." In 1961, on a beach, figures wearing winter clothes in the heat of summer approached to comment on her intimate life, details no one knew. When a guard approached, they evaporated. In 1972, already a mother, she encountered a group of them in disguise. A woman wore a badly placed, crooked wig. The phrase was always the same, a disturbing mantra: "You still don't remember." They were monitoring the experiment, checking on the chosen one. The mental block lasted 34 years. The dam broke in 1981. Próspera, now 42 years old, picked up a book. It was a work by Antonio Ribera, the father of Spanish ufology. As she read about other cases, it was as if a key turned in her mind. The flash, the ship, the beings, the uprooted olive tree, the hybrid, the implants, it all came back in a violent torrent of images. She wasn't crazy. Her husband, in a rare gesture of love and trust, believed her immediately. Together, they sought out Antonio Ribera. The ufologist, accustomed to frauds and confusion, was stunned by the consistency, the wealth of detail, and Próspera's honest simplicity. She underwent hypnotic regressions, and here is the acid test. Under hypnosis, she didn't change a comma. She didn't invent flourishes. The conscious story and the subconscious story were identical. The final piece of the puzzle came from Anita, the older sister who for years had remained silent, forbidden by her husband to speak of nonsense, finally broke her silence after becoming a widow. Anita confirmed, yes, they came to our house. Yes, they asked for water. Yes, the lights existed. The case of Próspera Muñoz remains to this day an inexplicable scar on Spanish history. Skeptics point to the lack of implants in modern exams. Perhaps they were absorbed, perhaps they were ethereal, or perhaps they were never physically there. But how do you explain sheep surgically mutilated in 1947, decades before this phenomenon became famous in the United States? How do you explain the description of flat screens and digital images by a rural girl who didn't even have electricity at home? How do you explain Anita's confirmation and the shared trauma? Próspera never made money from her story. She lived her life in Jumilla, humble, open, repeating her account with the conviction of someone who doesn't need to convince anyone because she knows what she lived. She was and is living proof that the universe can knock on anyone's door, anywhere, whether in a gleaming metropolis or a dark country house in dictatorship-era Spain. And now I return the question to you. If beings from another world offered you a gift, as they did to Próspera, would you choose the cure, or would you accept knowing the future, even knowing that the future might be terrible? What does your intuition say about the visitors of Jumilla? Were they scientists? Were they time travelers? Or something much older? Leave your theory in the comments. I read everything. If this script hooked you until this point, smash that like button. It is the only way to guarantee the next file is opened. Check your subscription to Alien Cases. I am the architect of enigmas. The universe is vast, and we are just starting to look at the sky. Until the next abduction or contact that makes us reflect, in this vast universe, are we the only inhabitants with intelligence?